Hi everyone, and welcome back to Fred Talks, a podcast where we talk all about the fashion industry and why it might be more important than you'd think, but less glamorous than it seems. In today's episode, we will be talking about ageism in fashion industry, because I have seen quite a few articles and quite a few discussions about this topic, and I'm not entirely sure if I agree with all of them. So I decided to talk about where I think the ageism does affect people in the fashion industry and where it doesn't, and why it might be very stupid, or why it is actually very stupid. And where I think it's very, very obvious is the modeling industry. Models are definitely the ones that are the most affected by this, no discussion about that. And I do understand that a lot of people might not understand or might not know about how the modeling industry works, so let me introduce you to this. So models are usually scouted around the age 13 to 15, sometimes at the age 12, but I would say 12, 13 to 15 is when they're being scouted, which you might think is really, really young, but the modeling agencies kind of explains this by saying that the first 2 years are to prepare the model for the actual world. So once the model is prepared, roughly around between the age 15, 17, depend on when she was discovered, they usually start working. And usually the first market they are sent to is Asia, because although a lot of people don't realize this, Asian market, especially China, Japan, Korea, South Korea, are really big for the models, and that's where they make the most money. Also, disclaimer, I know fair share about this because my friend is a model, and I've known her before she even became the model, so I've really been there throughout her entire career, so that's why I know. Once they gain some experience and have a good enough portfolio, they're usually sent to Europe. Also, I'm not entirely sure how this works in America, but I can imagine that it's the Asia first too, and then it's probably for American for European people, for European models, Europe, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm talking about European models now. So once they have the experience and they have good enough portfolio, they're sent to castings around Europe. Usually it's Milan, Paris, and then Germany in general, because German's market is also quite good for commercials. Also, another thing that people probably don't realize, magazines don't make you money, and the catwalk does make you money, but it also doesn't make you money far as much as commercials. Anyway, back to Milan and Paris. When the models are sent there, it's usually for the fashion weeks, and it's usually because they are trying to gain some sort of, I would say, respect or prestige by walking big fashion shows, or by saying that they walked on the big runways on the big fashion weeks. Interestingly enough, I have noticed that not a lot of models are being sent to London to gain the respect or to gain the reputation. Now, when the models are in Milan and Paris, they're usually around, I want to say, between 17 and 19. And this time is really important for them to gain the popularity, because now it sort of decides whether they're going to be the big supermodels that you know, or whether they're going to be the small models that will make living out of being models, but they're not going to be as famous. Because that is another thing that I believe people don't really realize. Modeling is a job as any other, well, it's not as any other jobs, but it is a job. A lot of people do it, probably a lot more than you realize, because for a everyday person, they know models like Gigi Hadid or Bella Hadid or Naomi Campbell, models that are very famous, models that always walk the catwalks, the most prestigious catwalks, models that are on the covers of magazines. But they don't really realize that, even if you go to Asda, and you want to buy something from George, there will be pictures of models of the clothes being modeled by someone, and those are also models. It's not just the big magazines, it's quite literally everyday small commercials that you see anywhere from, for small brands, for campaigns that you see in your local shopping mall. Those are all modeling jobs that just aren't as it's not like they're not big, but they're not as spoke about. But I feel like people don't realize that those are still models, and then modeling actually makes living to a lot more people than is commonly known. However, this episode is not about modeling industry, it's about the ageism. So when they are in Europe, as I said, usually around like 19, because it's around the age 20 to 25, which is the peak for models, as the peak of their career. That's when it's kind of decided whether they're going to be a commercial model or a famous model, or like a high-end, high fashion model, which are usually more famous than the commercial models. And they're also being taken more seriously for some reason. I don't know why it's that, because models working commercials can make quite a lot, well, not quite a lot of money, even without being famous or respected by the, wide public. But as I said, 20 to 25 is the peak of the modeling career. It's probably something like, I want to say 40 to 50 or 40 to 60 for any other career. But once the model turns 25, it is usually expected for her career to go a bit down, for her to retire. I did notice recently that this has been a bit pushed, and now it's usually around the age 30 when the models retire. But if you think about it, 25, even 30 is ridiculously young. That's why a lot of people start their career not finishing them. And what seems to be very concerning is that if you look at any very famous models from the 2010s, roughly 2010s, they are now in their 30s and they all willingly retired from modeling and moved to their own projects or moved to doing some other stuff in general. And why this is so concerning, if you think about it, is that there isn't any real reason for models having to retire this young. Let's take professional athletes who also retire extremely young, but that is because their body can only hold up to the standard that they were pushing it to only for a certain amount of time. So that makes sort of sense, but models aren't, although the job is extremely physically demanding as well, it's not as physically demanding for them to having to retire at such a young age. So we have to ask why. And the answer is that for some unknown reason, fashion industry really heavily pushes youth. I think everyone remembers the infamous Calvin Klein commentary on Kate Moss saying that she has something, or there's something childlike about her that, what did he say? Something like it tickles your fantasy on something equally creepy. To be fair, I think it's not just the fashion industry, it's just society in general, but specifically in fashion industry, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever if you think about it a bit deeply. Because originally, I actually got this idea for this episode many months ago when I was sitting on a fashion show, and it was a fashion show at Graduate Fashion Week, which, for those who wouldn't know what Graduate Fashion Week is, it's quite literally what it says. It's a fashion week for the fresh fashion graduates. And obviously, I can imagine that their budget isn't really big, if there's even any budget. So the models walking the runway were probably either just friends of the designers, or they were, some models that, I don't know, like my uni, for example, had a modeling agency sort of a thing where, people would just apply to be models, and then when somebody needed models for photo shoots or whatever, they would just go there because it was for free. But so I can imagine it was probably something like that, or they were professional models, but they were very young and very beginning. And I remember sitting there thinking that they're not really doing a really good job, but I wasn't offended by it, or I wasn't, it wasn't something that I would be upset about. But I felt really sorry for them because all of them were so young, and you could tell that they're young and insecure and, don't really know what to do yet. And obviously, it makes sense because they're clearly just beginning, if they are professionals even to begin with. And to be honest, I kind of forgot about it. But then we had the big, not scandal, but the big event where Nicole Kidman's daughter debuted her career on opening Miu Miu show. And she wasn't great, and it's like, luckily no one was really upset at her, but rather about the people, or at the people that put her in the position, because she obviously doesn't have the experience. She was also only, I think, 16 or 15 years old, really, really, really young. And I can only imagine how terrifying it must have been for her, for someone this young, to walk their first fashion show for a brand that's this big, and the anticipation must have been so high. And I don't really think it's fair on her and on the other models, and on everyone, for whoever decided to put her there, probably the casting director or creative director. Anyway, what was good about this fashion show was that the choice of models was quite wide. So we really had some really extremely young models, but we also had some more mature models, and we also had Willem Dafoe, which was a bit random, but he was great. Anyway, this is not what the video is about. And you could really see the difference between the more matured or more experienced models. It wasn't even about the age, it was really about the experience. The more experienced models were a lot more confident, and they were overall a lot nicer to look at. It felt like they present the clothes a lot better, simply because obviously they've got more experience. That's not just in modeling, that's in any job. Obviously, the older your senior is going to be better, more experienced, more sure in their job than someone who just started. And to get these two experiences really made me think about how it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever for models having to be this young and having to start this young. Models, although they are being seen as the most beautiful women on the planet Earth, they are very often the most insecure because they, since a very, very, very young age, since they've been literally kids, keep hearing about how they're not good enough, how they're too fat, too thin, their hair's not long enough, their hair's not short enough, their skin is bad, their skin is too good, their eyes aren't big enough, their eyes too big. They're just never the perfect spot for everyone because different markets, different brands just want different things, just like people, if you put 10 girls and 10 men, they're not gonna all like the same type of a person. That's just completely normal. But if this is your profession and you keep hearing the rejection, you keep being rejected, you keep hearing how you're not good enough all the time, I can imagine how much this must mess up with your mentality when you're exposed to this as a child. And I believe that this is also the reason why models deliberately retire so young, because they're just had enough, and I can't say I blame them, but it really doesn't make any sense because the brands that are hiring the models, for majority of the time, their targeted audience aren't of the age as the models are, because quite honestly, will anyone at the age of 20 be able to afford Prada? Probably not. Will it be someone who's maybe at least 35 plus? Most likely. So I don't really understand why the fashion industry and why the brands aren't showing us how their product will look like on the people that will actually buy it. Maybe it's because they want to lure people, or they want to create the illusion that, oh, you're gonna look this, you're gonna look this young if you wear my skirt, but it's not, A, it's not true, and B, why do we associate youth with being better? Because another point that I want to make is that with everything else but models in the fashion industry, the older is better. I remember I think it was Ryan Yip talking about how a lot of people often use the argument that a certain collection reference a different collection from the past, and you are using it as an argument for why the collection is really good, when if the original collection just wasn't great, just because you reference it doesn't, just age doesn't make it any better, and just because you reference an older collection doesn't mean that your collection is automatically good. So why, if we can apply this to the garments, why can't we apply this to women in fashion industry, to women in general? Because honestly, I believe that if the models started a lot older, if they started at the age of at least 18, when they are at least somewhat adult, and they can stand up for them a bit better, they can, legally do things, or do a lot more things or be more responsible than children are when you're 15 or even less, it would do the favor to, I think, quite literally everyone. Because I think the models wouldn't burn out, because I can imagine that if a model hears that, I don't know, her legs aren't long enough, but she's 20 compared to 15, it will hurt her in a way, but I think she will be a lot more able to comprehend it, and it will be easier for her to understand that this is just what the brand wants, and there's nothing personal against her, and so they wouldn't burn out so easily, and they could have a lot longer lasting career, which would be better for them, because they can, just build a career, while now they spend they spend a great amount of their childhood trying to build something that's only gonna last for a couple of years, probably less than a decade, maximum of a decade, which is really sad, and it feels sort of like a waste of time in a sense. So they would have a lot, better perspective when it comes to their career. B, it would be better for the brands, because the brands then would have a lot bigger choice of models that they can use in their campaigns and on their fashion shows that will actually, equal their targeted audience. I believe that if the targeted audience see what they will actually look like, what women in their age will look like in the clothes that they're about to buy, it will probably increase sales for everyone, in my personal opinion. I'm not an expert in sales, but this is just what I feel like a consumer. Yeah. It would also be a lot better for the society, because I believe that if we pushed more, if we pushed more mature women in an industry that's meant to be so glamorous, and it's so powerful when it comes to I guess, opinions on people in a sense, it would be better for everyone, because honestly, a 25-year-old woman, which is me, is a lot more confident than a 15-year-old, but is definitely a lot less confident than when I will be 45. And I really think that we should try to destroy this really stupid stigma of young women are better than old women. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense, because your confidence and your happiness with you being content with yourself is only gonna get better with the age. So why are we trying to make women feel like, you know, after they're 25 they're not good anymore? It just doesn't make any sense. So these are my reasons why I believe that ageism in modeling industry doesn't make sense, and why I believe that ageism affects the modeling industry the most when it comes to the whole of fashion industry. Because I did see people talking about how it affects every other career, and I don't think this is necessarily true, but I do see how people think that you have to be young in order to make it in the fashion industry. How you have to be, you know, in your 20s to make it big, and if you're 30 plus, you're less likely to get a chance. But I don't think this is necessarily true, because what I believe is happening here is that it's the younger generation, it's the younger people that have social media or are more out and about are more speak more about their experience or about what they're doing, and you're just more likely to see a younger person talking and sharing their experience in working in the fashion industry compared to someone who's 40. But if you actually look at the job offers, they often are looking for someone who's a senior, who's, you know, a mid to senior level. And how are you a mid to senior level when you're 20? That just doesn't make sense. It's obviously, it's an industry like any other. It's been around for ages and ages and decades, and obviously people have been working there for decades and decades, and they are still working there for decades and decades, which means that obviously all the senior positions are a lot older. They're just not so visible because they choose not to be. So I don't think that ageism really affects any other professions, or at least nowhere near as much as it affects the modeling industry, because, as you know, obviously, as I spoke about, models are more visible. While what just happened? Because, as I already explained, models are visible a lot more than anyone else, any other profession. Because if you think about it, a PR person doesn't have to be young today. Like, there's no point in it. Because this is also another fact that relates to the modeling industry as well, is that with the age you gain more experience, and hence you can be on a higher position, and hence you're more valuable to whatever, not industry, well, industry as well, but whatever part of the industry you're in. And this is what I mentioned about the modeling, that a lot, like your younger models aren't as experienced as the older ones, obviously, and hence aren't as good. But the issue here is that in any other professions you don't really see it, while in the modeling industry it's very obvious. Anyway, I guess that's it from me for today. I think I said everything I wanted about why the industry should change, and how it's not really fair to say that the ageism affects the entirety of fashion industry. Well, in fact, it really only properly affects the models. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I shall see you next time.